absolutely loved Remake. The gameplay it's basically what like Final Fantasy 15 and 13 were like trying to be. Like it's like they finally reached that amazing kinetic just you feel like you're in there fighting and hitting.
It's been absolutely mind blowing. And I'm not a fan of open world games as such. I like things to be a little bit not necessarily linear, but if we're going to have large zones that they are fairly self-contained, there's gatekeeping to an extent where you have to complete XYZ tasks before you can move to the next zone. Otherwise, otherwise I feel it becomes a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
So as much as the maps already look as if they're really, really big, I really like the idea, where everything's greyed out until such times as you've visited the place, so that you can bit by bit sort of, colorize the map and know where you've visited. There's gameplay mechanics whereby you can go to towers, and it'll actually, I believe this is in the most recent Zelda games as well, where activating the tower will actually indicate the points of interest around the map. If you would actually, rather than taking the time to explore every nook and cranny, if you only want to visit the points of interest, it's already given you that information. So I think it, having played Final Fantasy 16, there's quite a lot of open zones there, and I felt that was a good blend of sort of narrow corridors and open zone areas, and I hope that 7 will do the same. And from what we've been shown so far, it does actually appear that that's the kind of style or the blend that they're going for. But I think anyone who has a background with Final Fantasy VII and also the compilation as well, the amount of new fresh content, but also really familiar, nostalgic things you were not expecting to see within these open zones is just absolutely fantastic. So I'm chomping at the bit to get my hands on it.
I think one of them said it was something like 2 to 3 times larger than Remake, which, despite only being in Midgar, was still a fairly substantially chunky game.
So yeah, kind of looking back at Remake, as much as there were many areas that were revisited 2 or 3 times over the course of the game, and sure, that sort of brought different times of day or different conversations that could be had and so on and so forth. That they did manage to cram in quite a number of different unique areas into Remake, but I think Rebirth is just going to be off the charts. And I think this is them properly starting to spread their wings, a little bit, because Remake itself obviously was designed with the limitations of the PS4 in mind, whereas Rebirth is just full blown PS5. Those constraints, which kind of it makes sense that they've designed the games that way, but I agree that I think it's going to be substantially bigger. But one of the things that has really, really captured my imagination is that it's not just empty space. They've actually filled it with items of interest, not only the sort of the points of interest, such as like conversations with characters or interesting fights with enemies. The amount of thought and that has gone into this is unbelievable, and it's so much better. I had extremely high expectations for the game anyway, but what I've seen so far has just blown all of them out of the water. Like I'm like the flying chocobos for a start, because it just adds a whole new dimension to the game. It's not it's no longer a case of just running around on a map and seeing what you can find on the ground. You now have a full living, breathing space, 360 degree. You can be up in the air viewing this from above, and the whole party's up there, including Red 13. That just seeing Red 13 on a chocobo, just that has been one of my favourite things.
You beat me to it. Red 13 on a chocobo. like this. It's the most beautiful. It's like interview I've seen with this. They're just, you know what, guys, we're just gonna do this. Like, doesn't have to make any fucking sense. It's already a talking dog, cat thing on a giant bird. Let's just be a bit silly with this.
Exactly. In Final Fantasy VII, the original game was like that. There were so many parts of it that were just ridiculous and fun. Exactly. So as much as Remake kind of they did have some elements of it, but it was a fairly gritty game. Whereas that's, you know, I guess it's kind of reflective of how the opening of Final Fantasy VII is before you leave Midgar. But yeah, like Final Fantasy VII is, you know, it can get really goofy at times. I love that they've actually reintroduced that element of it.
Oh man, I don't know if you fully understand like how obsessed I was with Vincent Valentine. I could send you some really embarrassing photos. In fact, I might just do that while I gush about him. Originally, and I'm not even remotely embarrassed to admit this, he was the original reason I started growing my hair long and wore a bandana. Eventually, it just became a kind of look for me anyway, and I just kind of stuck with it. But when I originally saw the character, just with a lot of us, it just, the dude was so freaking edgy and cool and appealed to everything that a young 15, 16-year-old he was basically the Spike Spiegel, Cowboy Bebop of Final Fantasy. And go check out Discord.
Well,
that's me.
Can see the likeness there, yeah.
20 years ago, before I had facial hair. Mildly obsessed, and seeing this character come back is an experience for me. Like, I tend to be like a bit cynical. Well, not cynical, but analytical when it comes to stuff. I'm like, well, is the quality okay? Is the story consistent? I don't gush about stuff, but I will gush about Vincent Valentine until the cows come home, and
rightfully so.
Yeah, it's my favorite character design of anything ever, and pretty much the greatest dream I could ever imagine of came true yesterday. Being a tabletop player myself, having like an entire show here, actual play, people tend to call me a discount Matt Mercer. He's
and you're okay with that?
I'm totally okay with that. It's like he's going to be voicing Vincent Valentine. And if you've ever heard Matt Mercer, the dude is just Vincent Valentine. He's like edgy McEdgelord, and he can just edge like nobody else can. He just has the voice for that swagger and cool and kind of try hard edginess that like that's one of my favorite things about Vincent. Sometimes it seems like he's not even entirely aware of his own cringe. And I feel like the writers know he's a little cringy, but they kind of like, they embrace it anyway. Like like the fact that he refuses to buy a mobile phone for half of Advent Children, and then just like halfway through the movie it's like, can anyone tell me where I can buy a phone? Like, who the fuck doesn't know how to buy a phone? You have a magic teleporting cape and you don't know where to buy a phone. Like, can you tell me where to buy a magic teleporting cape? And I'll buy you as many phones as you want. Like, that shit's... I
think he's an amazing character, and he was, I must admit, back in the early days of playing Final Fantasy VII, he was always in my endgame party of 3. I just thought it was awesome. I really liked him in Dirge of Cerberus as well. I know the game itself gets a bad rap, and I kind of, once you make your peace with some of the more wild parts of the narrative and the gameplay, you know, it's pretty decent. And I kind of liked that they explored his background an awful lot more. So I'm I'm with you in that I'm extraordinarily excited to have Vincent appear in the game, because I was kind of worried that when they started talking about the events of Rebirth might be shifted around a little bit and you might visit locations in a different order. I was worried that they might hold Vincent back until part 3.
Which they are. Well, they're not. That's the thing. He's going to be there. But him and Sid aren't going to be playable. We haven't even seen footage of Sid. So are they just not going to visit Rocket Town until after the Forgotten Capital, or what?
Well, they obviously did the same thing with Red 13 at the end of Remake. And if we're going on the assumption that there's not going to be a change in the order of locations visited prior to the Forgotten Capital, i.e. they're not going to go to the Northern Crater first and then go to the Forgotten Capital, there's actually not a huge amount of story between acquiring Sid and the Forgotten Capital itself, because realistically it's just a return to the Gold Saucer, then Temple of the Ancients, and then off you go to the Forgotten Capital. So
I feel like, though, with Vincent, that could be like the whole, like, I feel like 13 was added like in the last quarter as a non-playable, but I feel like Vincent's going to have to just not be there for like a third of the game. Or
yeah, it kind of depends on what they do. You know, if he does actually join the party and then just hangs about in the background, or if he's actually in the battle as well, the way that Red 13 was, or if you meet him and then leave him and then he shows up again later. You know, I'm kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt right now, in that there's a reason that they've done this. I mean, other than having to introduce or being able to introduce new characters, new techniques, for part 3, you know, kind of, if you introduce all of it right now, then where's that kind of gameplay?
They know what the fans want. They will not give it to us until we like post 5 billion things on Twitter about it. Do you think they're going to change what happened in the Forgotten Capital? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
In terms of who bites the dust, no, I don't. I think the circumstances of how we get there are likely to change, and I actually, I've never changed my opinion on this, and I've been pretty open about it on whichever chats and interviews I've done since Remake came out. But because with the books that I write, I've spent so much time researching how Najima, in particular, sort of he views world mythology or philosophies, religious philosophies. And one of the things that seems to keep cropping up is that fate cannot be changed. Now this is pretty prominent in.
Wasn't that? That's what actually upset me, for lack of a better word, about Remake. It feels like they were trying to change stuff that already happened, and there's stuff in, like, apparently Jesse is still not Jesse. Biggs is still alive. Isn't that a change to the original canon?
Well, the thing is that if you, with respect to Greek mythology in particular, the idea is that nobody can escape their fate. You can change the circumstances, but the how your life plays out is predetermined. In Norse mythology, Norse culture, same thing applies, that you cannot escape your fate. If you're destined to die on the battlefield, you will die on the battlefield. But what you can do is change how. So you may die in a different battle. You may die by a different means. You may, someone else may be the one to kill you, but you will still die on the battlefield. So this idea of, I think the end of Remake is a massive red herring. I think the idea of defeating the Whispers is not necessarily indicative of everything is now changed. Like I still think there will be certain elements of fate that you can't outrun. One of which is that I think Aerith will still die. I think. Sorry.
Oh, I did know about that one.
Okay, that's the one I was wondering. Yeah, we have the spoiler alert up anyway. So,
yeah. I think after 25 years we might be okay with that one.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of like the Star Trek Kelvin timeline.
I'm not too familiar with that, but yeah, I think the point here is that I think what happens in the original game will still happen. It'll just the details of it will change.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I'll say that. It bugged me what they were trying to do in Remake's additional story elements, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and see where it goes.
And obviously,
Matt Mercer may be at least 33% of the reason why.
I don't know a lot about the changes and all that, but do you think that's from a storytelling standpoint? Is that to make sure that players that have played the original over and over again feel like they could still be surprised?
I do. I think there's two key things here. The first one is that for anyone who had played the original game, I think most of us were expecting not necessarily a one-for-one remake, but something close to follow the original narrative. So what we got at the end was a bit confusing, and for a lot of people, not quite. It was uncomfortable and dissatisfying. But one thing that we could all agree on was that they have put us in a position where, despite actually knowing exactly what the story of Final Fantasy VII is, we don't know what's going to happen next, which is none of us expected that. None of us expected to be in a position after Remake where we didn't know what the next part was going to bring.
Right.
Which I think is absolutely spectacular storytelling. Now, one of the things that, the murder of Aerith at the Forgotten Capital is one of the most iconic moments in video game history. Everyone and the grandmother know about this.
Yeah.
So how do you do that if you're going to have a moment like that without, or in order to progress with the story and tell the story that you want to tell? How do you come up against a situation where you still shock people? I personally think the answer to that is that you make people think it's going to change, and then pull the rug out from underneath them. And I specifically think players will be given. They'll be made to feel as if they will be able to save Aerith, and then they won't.
I can already see we're going to be at the Forgotten Capital, and they're going to play this right up to the final 7 seconds, as they keep alluding to, that you can do something. And no, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. They're going to keep pushing back and forth, and it stresses me out just thinking about experiencing that. I think that's the point. They want you to feel what you felt back then, and you can't go home again, as the motto says. And if they can pull that off, hats off. So
many different people have different takes, and almost none of us have any clue what's actually going to happen. It could be shocking that a different character will die. It could be shocking that
Cloud dies.
Or it could be shocking that Cloud dies. It could be shocking that Aerith dies in a different location.
Tifa. Oh my god! Imagine if it was Tifa. The internet would.
There's so many narrative reasons why Tifa makes sense to now be the target. But for me personally, I think the most narrative sense in the way to shock fans the most is, as I described, that you give them, you dangle this carrot of you can actually save her, and then you take the carrot away. I think that is how you remain true to the original, but it's just as devastating for returning fans.
Hey there, folks. I know nobody wants to listen to a creator shield themselves for 90 seconds, so I'm not going to. If you enjoyed this, we do the show live every Sunday on Twitch at 6 p.m. BST. Feel free to pop over TNEQL. And if you would like to support us in making the channel bigger and helping it grow, you can also check us out on Patreon, also at TNEQL. Take care of yourselves. Stay beautiful.